What are you building in the world, and how do you need to show up to talk about it?
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we're speaking with author, coach, and group skill builder, Margaret Watts Romney, who believes it's time you accepted that what you have to say needs to be said. But in order for us to see true growth, we have to be ready to do the work around how we show up and how we talk about the value that we will bring to the world. Hello there, and welcome in to the most recent installment of Growth Ready. I am very excited today to be welcoming in Margaret Watts Romney to the show. And before we get into a plethora of what I know is going to be fun, insightful conversation, I want to ask you, Margaret, what I ask everybody at this point of the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
I love this question. It's gotten me really thinking, but I want to ask you a question back, and that is, what do you mean by growth?
Gosh, I am just so and you didn't give me any preparation for this.
I
You
didn't. I'm
tell
so
me.
mean.
Here's
I'm
a
so
little trap
mean.
for Steve.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it gets really funny, is that one of the things that I frequently talk about on stages specifically is I will say to the room, hey, can everybody give me a word that they associate with the word growth? And about 20 words later, we realize that the word growth, in terms of the definition that maybe a dictionary may hand us, doesn't mean a whole lot. Because for me, what I find growth to be is the experience. It's an experience more than it is a definition. It's a way that we have truly encountered what comes with growth and felt it and gone through it in order for us to then be able to simply relate to it in certain moments.
I love that. And what are some of the words that come up? You say there's about 20 words.
We get everything from pain to joy to sacrifice. And it says so much, right? The word says so much about, like, oh wow, so your growth journey is one of adversity, and your growth journey is one of fulfillment, and all this kind of thing. And all these words come flying out, and I go, we use this word in meetings all the time. Like, everyone hears it and sees it the same. It turns out you could be in a room of 20 and have 20 completely interpretations of the word.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I had an experience with that with a client a couple of years ago. I was working with a leader, and it was about to be the beginning of the year. He was preparing his remarks to the entire company. He was setting a theme for the year, and he's like, I want the theme to be growth. And I was like, ugh, are you sure you want it to be growth? Because it kind of had this connotation of grow or else.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was like, is that really what you want? And as we were talking about it more and more, so we kind of had some pushback back and forth about it. And when we were just in the middle of a discussion, he said, he turned it into a question. What does it take to grow? I was like, oh, let's go there.
Yes.
And so we ended up having a theme for the whole year of growth mindset, and it shifted the entire meaning from this go, like, some of my friends and I joke when we go through adverse experience, like, oh, great, another growth opportunity. But instead, it turned into this curiosity of, okay, what does it take to grow? What's out there? What do I want? What do I want this to look like? What am I making? How can I get there? What's available?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And so I'm going to take that as your answer. I'm going to take that as your answer to what does it mean to be growth ready, in the sense of how can we simply step in, certainly the open-mindedness, I'm hearing that a lot, but to go even a bit more specific to you, Margaret, now, I want to learn more about when you think about just the way in which you're able to kind of step back from that word and even ask the question that you asked. I'm curious, where did that perspective originate? How have you formed this perspective of, okay, when I hear the word growth, it's really important to us, and to me specifically, that we establish some sense of clarity to avoid where we could go as opposed to where we probably should go.
And that's exactly it. Yeah, your word there of go. Where are we going? And so that was what was in my mind when I was talking with them, and my background working with other leaders. And about 10 years ago, I started working with TEDx speakers, and I've coached a bunch of them. And that's one of the primary questions. Where do you want your listeners to be at the end? Where are we going? Where do you want to land? What do you want them to walk away with? What's the feeling you want them to have after you're done speaking? So that's my orientation with this leader is, do you want at the end of this to all of his employees and teammates to feel, oh, okay, I'm going to go grow now? Or do you want them to go, yeah, I love this. I want us to move somewhere together. I want us to go somewhere. I feel this feeling of excitement. What's the feeling you want people to have at the end of your meeting, presentation, conversation, TED Talk,
Sure.
whatever it is?
Sure. I'm curious straight away. Where would you start with yourself when you think about your own process? When you think, hey, where am I going? Like, is it as simple as sitting with that question and answering that question? Is there more to it from a complexity standpoint? Is there more to navigate? Is there more to clarify for you, at least, to know that, hey, I'm pretty clear now as to what it is, and maybe I'm even using the words wrong. I shouldn't be saying pretty clear. I know I know where it is I want to be at the end of this. Like, what does that process look like for you?
I think it is a lot of like sitting and planning and getting quiet first and thinking. It is, and for me, I find the most clarity when I find specific words around what I want to feel, what I want to experience, what the sensations in my body. When I'll give another story. A few years ago, I was about to, actually, when I met that same client, the very first time I met that same client, I was a little nervous. They were in the tech industry. I was not. It was going to be all men in the room. I am not. They'd been working together for years and years and years. I was just meet them. Like the little voice in my head could have so many checklists for why I shouldn't be there, imposter, blah, blah, blah. But I thought, there's three things that I want at the end of this. I want us to feel trust in each other. I want us to feel curious about what's next, and I want us to feel respected. I want us to, so those three things: trust, curious, and respected. And we got into the middle of the conversation. I had 30 slides I'd prepared. We were going along, and about 7 slides in, the main guy goes, I'm just going to stop you right there. Wait. I've got a bunch of questions for you that I want to dive into here. And my little heart stops. And I'm like, oh, but there's so many more slides and I don't know what to do. But my presentation that I've worked on for weeks, and I took a breath instead, and I come back to my things like, do we feel respected? Actually, I do, because he is engaging me directly. Do I feel curious? Do we both feel curious? Yeah, that's why he's asking me questions. And do we feel, now I forgot the first thing that I had said. We felt curious, we felt interested, we trust, we felt trust. Yeah. So he was entrusting me with, he had some questions about his team.
Yep.
Exactly. And so I just left the deck behind and just met him where he was. And we just had a discussion. And at the end, we felt these three things. And so even though along the way, the path was twisty-turny, I knew at the end we landed with those three things.
I love that. And I think what's so valuable for me in that story is like, how much do we want to make our work? We can get as big as our growth journey. We can get as simple as just our day-to-day tasks. But when we think about where we are and where we're trying to get to, how much do we want to dial into the emotional component, the feelings that come with it all? Because I'm like, I didn't miss the fact that those were three things you wanted people to feel. They weren't just three things you wanted to achieve. They weren't just three things that you wanted to see. It was like, I want you to feel. And quite frankly, for someone like that gentleman to put his hand up and know that he could put his hand up and say what he said, that is the feeling. That is the sense of. And that's going that extra step of saying, hey, I don't want to simply get to the end of this and know that people now potentially trust me. People now potentially are curious towards me. I want them to feel it so much that it almost overcomes them to an extent in the
Yeah.
moment. And they're like, hey, I appreciate you may have 23 more slides, but I can't help but want to ask a question. If not, I've actually got about 15. Like,
Yeah.
here are my 15 questions. And to be quite frank, I'm honoring everything it is you want me to feel. And it's why I have to say something right now.
Right, right, right. And when I hear you repeating my words back to me, I'm actually part of me is like cringing, just like it sounds so like emotional. And frankly, I'm not really an emotional person. Like
Right.
I'm a, Libra sun and an Aquarius moon, whatever that means. Anyway, I don't live in my emotions very much, but I did some training with the Neuro Leadership Institute that taught me that about the brain and how we make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually don't make decisions from our logical center.
Right.
We make it from our emotional center. And if there's been studies for people who have had that emotional center damaged and cannot regulate or feel their emotions, and you hand them a blue pen and a black pen, you're like, which would you like to sign this document with? And they can't make the decision. And they all day go back and forth debating if it's blue or
Whichever
black.
one they pick, I'm like, why did I pick the black? I should definitely have done the blue. That would have been
Right. It's essentially an emotional decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad you took us there because I'm aware of your background and the neurology around words and neurology around emotions, and it's something that is not news to me. I'm aware of the emotional beings that we are, but I hope that we have listeners now just sort of being like, well, wait a second, Margaret, you're telling me that I'm not rational? It's just like, well, all we're saying is that some of that rationale is mainly rooted in emotion. Like that's the beauty
Yeah.
of it. And I think what it resonates massively with me is that I used to, when I was back swim coaching, I would tell athletes all the time, listen, I'm an emotional coach. And they would kind of look at me at first and I'd be like, I know you've never seen me cry. Like that's what you're thinking right now. I say emotional coach and you're like, Steve, I've never seen you cry. It's like that. Turns out there's more than one emotion. It turns
Yeah.
out that this word
Right.
emotion, for whatever it is, has we've created this lens around it. When we say I'm emotional, it's like, okay, I'm waiting for the tears, I'm waiting for the breakdown, I'm waiting, and it's so absolute when
Yeah.
really it's just every single thing that's flying through our body. Every time throughout the day, there's a representation of multiple emotions at play with anything and everything that we're doing. And the sooner we actually acknowledge that and accept that, I would argue the sooner we can actually find more consistent, rational behavior. And like that for me is what I've always enjoyed about being a highly emotional person, is that I've known that for a long time, and I can use that to my advantage, not in a weird way, but in a sense of like, hey, I can now know this about myself, so that when I feel certain things come into the surface, I recognize, I notice, and then I can process so much more effectively in the moment, as opposed to, like you were saying there, the stereotype. It's like, oh no, they're emotional, we're flying out, we're out of control. And so I'm just curious, like even when you think about the way in which you have become disciplined around your own emotions, what has that journey been like for you, Margaret? Like going from the person before doing all those studies around neurology to now being what you do and how you do it. What has your journey looked like around emotion?
Um, I'm not sure I could say I'm disciplined around emotions. Like, I don't know, like it's sort of like I think there's an analogy out there that our emotional brain, our instinctive brain is like an elephant, and our rational brain is like the rider. And we all have a rational rider, and we all have an elephant that really just wants to run through the forest and just wants to eat everything and go to sleep when it wants to sleep. You know, and so we're always, all of us have this balance back and forth, this dance between the little tiny rider on the back of the elephant and the elephant that just wants to run through the village.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we balance that? How do we be aware of it? And I love what you said in your own world of being that aware of the emotions. Emotions not like drama, but emotions as what is my experience? What is my gut? What is my instinct wanting to do? And by naming that, by saying, ah, our elephant got it. You are really hungry right now. Oh,
Right.
you're so sad right now. Oh, look at, you're so happy. By having a conversation, by naming it, then we can have, then our writer has more say in the matter than,
Mm,
but we don't, like, it takes a lot of effort for us to stay completely, it takes a lot of cognitive load is the technical word,
sure.
to stay in that writer position of like, oh, don't eat that candy bar, and you're going to sit and do the whole spreadsheet, and you're going to go run 5 miles after that, and you're going to go to bed and drink like glasses of water. Like, we just, like, at some point the elephant's like, yeah, no, I am done. I am not doing any of that. I'm
Mm,
playing hooky. I'm going to go eat an entire pizza and then just play video games all weekend. Nothing against video games, but it's and so there's that balance in between, and it's that getting awareness. All right, now this is where I'm operating from. Oh, this is what my body needs now. This is what my instincts need now. Ah,
mm.
this is how I can support my writer more so they can make decisions.
Yeah, and I even appreciate you calling me on the word discipline because I think about myself and it's like, yeah, you're aware, buddy, but discipline's a stretch. Discipline's a stretch, and so, but even as you use that, metaphor with the elephant too, I think it also what I love about the use of something like elephant is it speaks immediately to just the magnitude, right? It's like you pick one of the biggest animals that that there is, and it's like that's what we're looking at, folks. We're looking at this thing that at any point can, like you said, just go storming off into the jungle and tear down trees, and we just have to be aware that it has the ability to do that at any point. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate the idea that our rational mind can be an author, if you will, a writer.
Hmm.
That it and then there's an intentionality there, right? That immediately when you said writer, I was like, okay, that's intention. That's someone who's stopped their day to pick up a pen and get very intentional about what it is. I'm curious, just in your work today, whether it be with speakers, whether it be with leaders, how are you helping them get to that point of just simply saying, hey, this is what it looks like to step into maybe some form of rational behavior? And,
Mm.
I find myself immediately just thinking everyone's probably relating to that elephant right now. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, how help us relate to the rational person with the pen in their
Hmm.
hand a little bit more.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that the first thing is exactly what we're saying of being aware that it's there. Like, I think the people that I speak to that have the most intense relationship with the elephant are those who are afraid of public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, my hands shake, my guts turn into snakes, I have cold sweat down the back of my neck. I never want to feel any of those things. Please make them all go away so I never feel them again. And instead, I tell a story of when I was coaching some speakers at TEDx Boulder a number of years ago. It's the night. It's the big night. We've been preparing for months. I'm backstage in the dark, getting the speakers ready, helping them, do some pre-stage exercises and get their mics on. It is a sold out crowd, 2,500 people, and I'm standing with a woman who's never spoken in public before.
Wow.
She's been preparing for months. She loves her topic. She's well prepared, but she's about to go do something she has never done before. And as I approach her, I see her face is flushed bright red. Her legs are kind of wiggling. Her breath is kind of different than it normally is. And I walk up to her and I say, Laura, how you doing? What's going on? And she looks me in the eye and she's like, oh, I'm great. My body is just getting ready to be awesome.
Wow.
And she could tell, she knew it. Like, it wasn't like I'm overwhelmed by anxiety. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, she was observant. She observed it.
Mm,
She was aware, like, oh, my heart is racing. Okay, there's cold sweat down the back of my neck. My stomach feels like snakes. What's going on? Well, right now I have a lot of adrenaline because I'm about to go do a thing I've never done before, and my body is pumping me full of energy so I can go face all 5,000 eyes that are going to be looking at me, and
right.
I can give them my message, and I can take us all to a place at the end of having a new idea and a new understanding of the world. So it starts with that awareness, which is, I'm going to say one more thing. There's like, that's also the downfall, I think, when there's leaders, they're not in the grip of that shaking hands and snakes in their stomach anymore. So they think, well, I'm not emotional. When actually, though, that's when the emotions can creep in sideways. The emotions can, or squirt out sideways, whatever your analogy is. Like, that's when, oh, actually, I'm really upset with this. Actually, I'm really, really sad that that person left the organization. Actually, I really wish my team were doing more. And then that colors how they show up, or how they're using their words, or how they're making decisions.
Yeah, I there's something about that. In my world, I'll sometimes do like the yes and exercises. I'm like,
Mm,
okay, yeah, and yes, and something
mm,
about that word actually. The moment you said it, I was like, very much relate to that in the work that I'm doing. But I
mm,
almost want to like fire it right back at you now and just sort of ask, like, how does that serve us when it comes to whether it be our growth journey, how we just show up and do what we do every single day, when we're willing just to sort of stop and instead of maybe holding these emotions at an arm length,
mm,
using that word, actually,
mm.
this is what I feel right now.
Right.
Like in your experience, what's been the benefit for those folks that you've worked with that have learned how to say, actually, this is what's going on?
Mm. When you take, yeah, what I've seen in myself and others, when you take that moment and we say, actually, this is what's going on. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling, then you take the time to acknowledge the emotions, to ask them some questions. Okay,
Hmm.
what does the sadness want to say to me?
Yeah.
What is the anger saying to me? What is there to learn? Kind of like just letting them flow through instead of trying to stop that elephant
Hmm.
from doing what it wants to do. And then after having that conversation, after acknowledging it, there's always something to learn. And then the writer is more in charge. And then I
Hmm.
can return to my planning, my creativity, my way of connection, my empathy, my focus, my building for the future writer,
Yeah.
and
I
letting
mean,
it be in charge.
and I love that. I love that idea of the destination there of just when we say, actually, this is what I'm feeling, we can immediately attain greater ownership and responsibility of the writer.
Mm,
Like that's what
yeah.
you're doing. And, in a way, I was kind of alluding to that in myself is that always been so comfortable with my emotions and sharing them. It's funny. I
Hmm.
joke with people all the time when they say, "Hey, can we grab a coffee?" I'm like, "Are you sure you want to grab a coffee with me?" Because we don't just stay at the surface; we dive right down straight away. I don't. We go 0 to 60 very quickly, very quickly. And I've scared a few people off during coffees. I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. But at the end of the day, to your point, it's partly why I do it. It's like it's so much
Hmm.
easier to actually then just own the pen, just to keep going with that
Yeah.
metaphor. It's like this is just me. This is what you get when you get Steve. You get the whole shebang. If you've known me for 5 minutes or 5 years, this is kind of how
Hmm.
I operate. And I think when I really want to move towards the work that you're doing now more today, and when what I love how the way you market the work that you're doing, you see it as the intersection of public speaking, neurology, and purposeful leadership. And so
Hmm.
those are three things that, in their own right, would be a great offering, right? It would be someone like, hey, someone's going to help me about public speaking. Hey, someone's going to help. All these kind of, we can hit each one individually and say, these are all essential pieces in
Hmm.
their own right. So I'm
Hmm.
curious for you, when it comes to the work you're doing today, why do we need to be considering operating at the intersection of these three things?
Because because one of them will come up. The question that I like to ask people is, what are you building in the world and how do you need to show up to talk about it? And if you have an idea, if you have a vision, if you have a purpose, a mission, a story you want to tell, a thing you want to create, then you have to show up and talk about it. There's the
Mm,
public speaking. You need to get other people on board, join with them. There's your leadership. And if we're going to talk about those two, let's talk about what's going on inside yourself as well with your neurology. Let's talk about what's your relationship with your elephant? How is the writer? How are you managing the moments when there are surprises, when there are pivots, when there's chaos, when there's unknown. How do you work with yourself to stay on track, to keep that vision of what you and your people, team, organization want to move to?
Uh, it- it's I'm thinking of so many people already just in my life. It's amazing how the way you describe that. It's just like it's actually as simple as just, hey, once you've got an idea of what it is you want, are you ready to show up and talk about it? And what I love about
Yeah.
that is it's like that doesn't need to be on a TEDx stage to 2,500 people.
No.
That can literally be over dinner tonight with a spouse. You know, that's how, granular we can get with something like that. And one thing I've noticed just in my entrepreneurship journey is just how easy it is to assume that that's not important. It's really
Yes.
easy to assume like, hey, you know what? I know what I want and that's enough. And it's like, well, it's not really, like, because at a certain point, yes, to your point, leadership, you got to convince other people. You're probably going to need support at some point. But how about that person? My mind immediately goes to the person in the mirror. I'm just like, okay,
Mhm.
can I convince myself? Like, if I was to
Right.
pitch me on this right now, am I in? Am
Right.
I going to buy? And that was my first year as an entrepreneur. Was like, I don't think I would buy from me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think I would invest in me, because the moment I start talking about it, every time I talk about it, it sounds different every single time. Just like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that can't be good. That can't be good.
Right, right. I love what you're saying, and I love what you're. Yeah, it's exact. We're holding the same vision here. It's not
Mm,
just public speaking on a stage on the red dot in a spotlight.
right.
It's the conversation with the spouse. It's listening to a mentor 20 years ago. And this is the word that I use to describe this is your speakership. Like that
Mm,
first year that you started asking those questions, how am I showing up? What am I saying? You were examining your speakership. Like, how am I using my words wherever I am to build towards this thing that I want to do?
mm,
And that's what I like when I was working first with TEDx speakers. We were, getting ready for their 15 minutes on the stage. Great. And then along the way, I realized there's so much more.
mm,
They'd been having conversations about refugees coming to this country, or saving dogs, or neurology, or eating crickets for protein, or LGBTQ rights, whatever their topic was, they'd been talking about it for years.
mhm,
And they needed to talk about it into the future. And that's where their attention was. How do I how do I say this in front of smaller crowds? How do I persuade other people who are against me? How do I get on bigger stages? How do I describe this idea concisely to a team?
mm.
That's your speakership.
Yeah. Okay, we got to explore speakership now. I love it. Like, because for me, again, it, I love when we get a topic like this, which in its, if we look at it under its own microscope, it seems very niche. And then suddenly, but
Mm,
when you look at the necessity around it, you suddenly go, oh my gosh, we all need this. We all need this.
yeah.
Again, I can see why people can listen to your description there and say, oh, this is kind of more for people that are fill in the blank. And I'm listening to you and I'm like, no, I don't hear that at all. I hear this is an essential piece. Like, to understand speakership in my own terms is an essential part of my own growth journey. Again, what's funny about this, Margaret, is that because you didn't answer it directly, I'm just like choosing answers throughout the conversation now to fill in the question, what does it mean to you to be growth ready? So knowing your speakership, I'm gonna add that one to the list too. Just a
Yeah.
little bit. But I'd
Ooh,
love
I
for you
love
to
that.
answer. Yeah, but I'd love for you to build upon that for me. Just like when you think about, like, for someone to get comfortable with one's speakership, like,
Yeah.
what is that journey in your opinion?
I think it is. So I like thinking about there's a few different ways to answer. What is the journey of knowing your speakership? I kind of want to define speakership just a little bit more
Yes,
for a
please.
second.
Yes, please.
So, for one thing, speakership is across time.
Hmm.
It is the thing that you've been leading towards, even if you didn't know you'd been leading towards it. Like you, the first year of your business, you kept trying words, but I'm sure, and knowing you and knowing some of your story, the ideas that you're doing now in your business, the ideas that you're practicing, actually were part of your coaching for years before that, decades before that. There's a something that has been showing up over time, over and over and over. And sometimes we can't even quite put words to it. Sometimes it is a feeling. Sometimes we don't even know it until we feel it, like, oh, that thing.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding yourself to know, like, what through time have I been leading towards. Second, it's on, like we've said, it's on lots of different stages, whether it's a conversation with your spouse or whether it is, at the front of the room, whatever room it is. And three, it's something that you're working on consistently. It's something that you're asking questions about, just like you did in your first year. Wow, would I show up for this? Would I buy this? No, I wouldn't. What do I need to do to change it? What are the skills I need? Is it my presence? Is it my energy, how I show up? Is it how I tell a story? Is it my vocabulary? Is it my, presentation strategy? Like what are the skills that I need? What is out there? And what do I need to do next to better myself, to grow?
Yeah.
There's the word.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, that's the word. I appreciate you firstly doing us our listeners a service. In my excitement gets the better of me, and I'm familiar enough with your work too to jump a step or two ahead. So I appreciate you pulling me back and saying, "Hey, let's just break down Speakership first for all the people left in Steve's wake." After that, let's now go back to that initial question. If someone's listening to that, and I love that breakdown, like how do you look at it across time? How do you look at it as different stages? And then how do you look at it in terms of the work you're doing consistently? How might someone now just simply start that process of saying, okay, I hear you, Margaret. Like, where do I look? Where do I maybe look for that kind of thing? And how do I start to map out this thing that could be my own speakership, if you will?
I would say sometimes people are clear on it. Sometimes people are like, oh, I know the thing I will always do is around child welfare. I know the things I've always shown up for, no matter what, is around mental health. I know the thing, sometimes people, it's obvious. Sometimes some of us have been doing a thing over and over, and we didn't quite know we were doing it. So I'd say, first of all, taking time to reflect, taking time by yourself to just, what have I been doing? How have I been showing up? One of my favorite questions around this is, what have you created that has given you satisfaction? And I choose those words very carefully. It's not what did you achieve. It's not what did you get praise for. It's not what did you accomplish. Is what did you create? And looking at that at different times in your life. Maybe when you were a child, you created an amazing pillow fort. Maybe when you were a kid, a teenager, you created a winning soccer team. Maybe as an adult, you created your life from scratch with a solid home and good relationships and a good job after coming from chaos and destitution. So what are the things you've been creating throughout your life that have brought you satisfaction? Not that have gotten you acclaim, not that have won awards, but that inside you went, yes, that's me.
I love that. And that immediately can go towards all three of those, which is great. It's just like, hey, once I get clear on what I've created, and let's go back to what we were talking about earlier, the emotion. What is that an emotional anchor that I can say, hey, this gave me satisfaction. I felt satisfied when I did this. Well, now you're forced to look back across your life. So we're looking back across time. We're looking at the different ways in which that maybe showed up. Even if it was only one, it still came with some form of a stage. It came with some sort of a situation. And then finally, what did the consistency of what was required to get there look like? Like, what was that consistent work? And now we're hitting on, okay, if I had to tell someone and share that story or share some of those insights, I'm pretty clear about what that might sound like,
Yeah, exactly. I'm clear on what it might look like. I'm clear what I want to continue doing. I'm clear on the thing that I want to continue working towards, even if it's so far away, even if it's such an infinite game that it will never be accomplished in my lifetime. It's the thing that I'm happy to keep on showing up for.
Yeah,
and
I
moving the
love
needle.
that. I love that caveat too, because again, that's what we're about on the show. It's like, hey, we're not here for stories of, in many ways, we're not really here for achievement. That's one thing I try to refrain from having conversations around on this show is that to speak of growth and to speak of readiness is to always allude to the journey and the process. And so if we're going to honor that, for us to figure those three things out and see that as a destination, as opposed to, as you're alluding to, something that we're going to continue doing, continue refining, and use as our almost as a North Star, if you
Yeah,
will, of like, hey, this is where I'm. This is going to help me get to where I'm trying to get to, even if I never get there. Like it's just going to
exactly.
keep me on the straight and narrow. And certainly as leaders and definitely as speakers, I think that's an essential part of that. I would love to, because I get these opportunities sometimes just to get a little bit more of the origin story. For you, Margaret, like when you think about how we've arrived at what you're doing now today, what were some of those moments in your life, or the moment in your life? Sometimes we don't have that amazing, incredible moment where everything made sense. It's more of a series of things. But how has what you're doing today come to be? Where did that all begin?
hmm hmm So I really appreciate that you're saying like it came a number of moments, a
Sure.
lot of little tiny moments along the way. But I'll tell you the story of one moment that
Mm.
I could put my finger on that it echoed what I'm doing now. So my first career, my undergrad degree was as a cellist. I was a music performance major playing classical cello. And I loved music. I loved learning. I loved being in the middle of it. I love listening. I did not like performing. Every time I performed, like shaking hands, tremory breath, and just feeling kind of sick to my stomach every single time afterwards. So after my undergrad degree, I closed my cello up in its case and it kind of sat in the corner for a long time. And in a few years later, I was living in Boston. I was in a community that we were all young, we were all away from home, we were all supporting each other, we were all having babies, and we were all young and going to each other's houses and bringing food and taking care of each other's kids. One of my friends said to me, she's like, the Christmas concert's coming up. I know you play cello. Would you please play Ave Maria with me? And I was like, oh, I mean, that means getting my cello out. And I took a breath and I thought of these people and how much I loved them and how much they'd given to me and how much we were there for each other. And I was like, okay, I will for you. So I took my cello out, I unclipped it from the case and started practicing. And the one thing I kept thinking of was how much I loved them and how much I did love this piece and I did love cello. And I wanted to give them the experience. I wanted to give them the feeling that I had had the first time I'd heard this piece and the first time I had performed it when I was much younger and had loved it so much. And I kept that feeling, kept that idea in my mind as I was practicing. And on the day of the concert, the room is in a church building, the chapel's all full, and I go sit in the front with the pianist and we start playing, and I just feel this outpouring of love for them and for the music and for Bach and for cello, and I played like I had never played before.
Wow.
And the room, it was like we were breathing together, and I finished and it was like there was a new kind of light in the room. And I realized after that the orientation I'd had towards my cello as an undergrad was all about myself. Am I doing it right? Am I going to mess up? Am I pleasing my teachers? Rarely. The answer was no. But when I was there in the room, what were they feeling? What were
Right.
they experiencing? What was the gift I wanted to give them? And when I eventually left Cello Land and went to working with speakers, that was the same orientation. The TEDx speakers, they were, what if I do this wrong? What if the audience judges me? I'm like, no, 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 we're not going to focus on yourself. If your TED Talk went viral, if everyone in the world heard your idea, how would the world change? And having that external attention, that external focus, that idea out in the world, that changed everything. And that was like the consistent through line from early in my life to even now today.
Yeah.
How are you as a leader What do your people around you need to hear? And what do they need from you? And what is their experience with you? What's the gift and the vision that you want to give them?
Gosh, I mean, I absolutely adore that story. It's a wonderful story, and it represents where you are today in such a beautiful way. The symmetry of the idea of the audience and the outpouring towards them, and so relatable as well when we think about this is where we can now go into a whole. We could probably do it, re-record a whole new episode now around education versus experience, and because that's something that really came through for me, and that is something that always hits home for me because I wasn't a great student too. I got all accustomed to hearing criticism and constructive feedback, let's call it, and and so like the thing for me was that for whatever reason, just the way I came into this world and the way I've gone through this life is that the world around me has always been my teacher. And for me, I listen to your story and I go, it's almost as though you needed enough time away from the confinement of education to see that what the experiences you could impact through your gift, through your talent. And like that is so, it's in such alignment. Let's use that as another answer for what does it mean to be growth ready. It's just like that idea of like, hey, if we can understand that the balance of education and experience is there and it is a balancing act, then we may not rely on one more than the other and give space for both so that we can eventually create the result that you were able to create in that moment.
It's both, and there's really a balance there of the education gave me the skills. I needed to sit in a practice room and do my scales and etudes and stuff for hours to have the facility, and also the experience. And yeah, it was both of those coming together.
Yeah, and we can bring it full, really all the way up to today now and just say, for anyone listening to this, I would love for you just to kind of see if we can, together land the plane of this conversation now around, when someone's sat thinking about, okay, I really struggle with this idea of just simply needing to say what needs to be said. And that's something I heard towards the end of that story, is the fact that saying what needs to be said can in fact be the greatest gift that we can give a situation. The same way in which you needing to play that cello was the gift that you needed to give to that situation. So talk us through how you might help someone find a greater level of comfort. We're not going to say get comfortable because it's a process and it takes time, but how can you help someone maybe find a greater level of comfort around saying what needs to be said?
I love that question. And what needs to be said, whether that is a vision of the future or naming a hard truth that's going on right now, or sometimes I'd say what needs to be said sometimes is asking a question as well, and inviting another perspective and listening, like, because the other person, the other party, that's what needs to be brought into the space. That's what needs to be added to the story. So, but your question of how do I support someone in discerning what needs to be said and what is their role in it? When I work with people, there's usually two different realms that we're looking at. One is externally, what are the words you're saying? What are the stories you're telling? What's the construction of the argument or the presentation or the meeting? So externally, and the other is internally. What's your mindset? What are the stories going on in your own mind? How is your own nervous system responding? How is your own, a lot of people use the word executive presence, and we kind of know what that means. How is your leadership presence? How is your just presence, period? And so we're looking at both of those. And some people want to start looking just at stories. Great, we do that. Look at the external, and then the internal gets woven in along the way. And some people want to just look at the mindset first and how are they showing up in their presence. And we get to a certain place like, okay, now I need to do the other. So it's sort of gauging for each person what's their path.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate about that is, you're really bringing us back to those three elements of speakership. You're asking people to reflect. You're asking people just to sit and say, okay, when I think about maybe past times where I've wanted to say what I I needed to say. Let me get that right again. I look back and say, hey, I know there were times where what I wanted to say was not said, or what was needed to be said wasn't said. What was the reason for that? What prevented me from doing that? What got in my way? And that we start to look back across time. We start to look at the stages, and again, from a consistency standpoint, what needs to change? What needs to change about helping myself get more consistent, where I believe that what needs to be said can be said, and it's a gift. It's for the good of those that are hearing it, and the internal process that comes with that too it's an area that we need to continue to play, and we just have to be comfortable playing in it, and that's something that I'm really getting just from your tone, your energy, your delivery, and everything that we've talked about here today, Margaret, is that none of this is figured out. None of this is figured out. It's all, but if we can step into it with enough of a willingness to say, despite it not being figured out, there's a true curiosity and desire for me just to nudge this thing along. And if I can't master it, then I sure as heck can better understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like we said in the beginning around growth, it's the journey, it's not the destination.
That's right. Well, what a wonderful insight to bring this conversation to a close that I knew would be a gift. And I don't know where those 45 minutes went, but they went somewhere. And it was, I really enjoyed having the chance to speak to you about a lot of this. But one thing I do know is there's going to be people listening to this that are eager just to learn a little bit more about the work that you do and what it might look like to even work with you. So with that being said, Margaret, where might people go to learn more about that information?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So I wrote a book a few years ago because people were asking me this exact thing. Like, I'm about to be on a stage. Many of them didn't have time, or I didn't have access to, availability. So I wrote a book. It's called Speakership is Leadership. You can find it in many different booksellers. My website is Master Speaker Lab, where there's a contact form there, and I show up on LinkedIn as well. I've a few of my clients, they said that what I offer on LinkedIn they're like little nuggets, little snacks. We like to give little pieces of advice to boost, because it is such a long journey. It is so long. How can I help you along the way?
Yeah, well, I love that. We got to feed the elephant one way or another, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that one LinkedIn snack at a time.
Right.
So I appreciate that. And Margaret, again, this has been an absolute pleasure. All that information you just shared, if we don't have it already, we'll get it from you, and we'll make sure we add it to the show notes. Just best of luck with everything going on in your world, and thanks again for everything you provided today.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. This is a real gift in the world.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And my thanks again to Margaret for joining us on this episode. As a communication media undergrad, I was a little bit of a geek throughout this episode, in the sense that I just love getting into the heart of how we communicate, why we communicate the way we do, the importance of it, getting to better understand this term speakership, courtesy of Margaret. Like, all of these things are facets of how we do what we do, but most importantly, they're what allow us to do it at a higher level. And so just to have a chance to dive more into so much of these kind of topics is a gift, as far as I'm concerned, for anybody who's committed to the idea of growth. But the question I want to ask you here as we wrap up is, how well are you respecting your emotions? Think about that for a moment. When it comes to your emotions, are they something you're engaging and interacting with daily? When you feel a certain way, do you acknowledge it in the moment? Do you get curious about it in the moment? Do you give your rational mind the opportunity to simply better understand how you're showing up emotionally? If you want to perform at the highest level within your respective industry, within your respective role, just within your life, at some point you have to make a decision. Am I going to respect and honor the emotions that are at play? Those emotions will be the catalyst for your behavior. So the sooner you recognize them and understand the role in which they're playing every day, the sooner you can really start to hone in how to best utilize them to your advantage. That's right. You can be sad and still execute at a high level. You can be frustrated and execute at a high level. You can be angry, etc., etc. You can experience these so-called negative emotions, but because you are tuned in to the way in which they're interacting with you, you can better serve how you rationally then show up and step into the roles that you need to play to perform at your best. So take the time, build that awareness, engage with yourself on an emotional level, maybe even invest. If this is difficult for you, invest in a therapist, invest in a practice, journaling, for instance, where you can simply get to better understand how you emotionally operate each and every single day. Again, my thanks to Margaret for this episode. My thanks to you, as always, for showing up and listening in to these incredible conversations around growth. If this is your first time, I appreciate that you've discovered us. I appreciate you're still listening. Make sure you subscribe to now be an avid listener from this point onwards. In addition to that, make sure you're sharing the episode with people who need to also explore what it means to hone their speakership. And finally, make sure you're rating the show. Okay, we're at about 62 5-star ratings the last time I checked, and I want to get to 100 by the end of 2025. So if you're listening to this and it's the middle of 2025, do your part and help us get more 5-star reviews. So take the time to do that. Take the time to keep listening. And again, take the time to keep investing in yourself to keep aspiring to grow. Best of luck with anything and everything going on in your world. I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.